Yo, what's up, Broncos country? This is Eddie with Colorado Sports Connection, and I'm joined with Mohamed tonight as usual, and our special guest Cameron. Tonight we're going to go over some of the stuff that we're going to go over OTAs from last week, week 3 of OTAs, mini camp coming up this week, and some rumors about Randy Gregory and about where would Justin Simmons go. So let's just get into it. So, guys, I wanted to ask you last week in OTAs, week 3. A lot of news came out that pretty much Zach Wilson is just he's done. Like he's not doing very good at all. He's the third string quarterback, obviously. And the battle is really going on between Stidham and Bo Nix. They're completely even from what I hear. Um, but at that point, it's like, if they're even at this point by training camp or the end of training camp, I believe Bo Nix is going to take charge of that first, starter role. So, what do you guys think? What did you think of OTAs this week, Cameron? And then we'll get to you, Mohammed.
Well, first things first, I want to say, thank you guys so much for having me. It's always nice to, get a chance to hop on podcasts and everything and get a chance to, talk Broncos football with you guys. And again, thank you guys for having me. As far as just this whole quarterback dilemma, I mean, it is the conversation. You probably talk to any single Bronco fan ever since Peyton Manning left. It's been nothing but that quarterback position. And, and I've been kind of beating this drum a little bit. I don't know. I'm sure you guys have been tuning into both 5280 and mainly, but my personal preference has been really for them to roll with three quarterbacks. But, the unfortunate thing is that if Zach progresses badly, right, and progresses probably more so interpreted positively, right? But but if he's progressing, backwards, that's not a good thing. And if that trends more and more for the worse, I don't know how you keep him on the roster. Like I really don't know how you keep him on the roster. Now, I made a prediction rather early. I said that I said I feel like maybe they'll roll with two quarterbacks. Or it certainly seems like it's trending that way. But it was more to the likes of that Stidham and Bo Nix will end up being the quarterbacks and not Zach Wilson. But I think and as I was been saying on my shows, I feel like if you were to ask my personal preference, it really is the idea that I want Wilson to be the sponge. I want Wilson to be the sponge. It doesn't matter that he sucks this year. It doesn't matter that he's taking in a little bit of, some lumps. And frankly, actually, I like the fact that he is, sucking it up right now because that affords him the opportunity to grow. Now, granted, if he gets cut, he gets cut. But I mean, like in a perfect world for me, I want him to be the third back on the roster come week one. And he's not really doing anything. I want him truly, ironically, to be the Sam Darnold for this team. I want him to not do anything and really just soak it in as much as he can, being with Sean Payton. They clearly traded for him, for a specific reason. I mean, and I don't need to look no further than obviously them, spending about a month or so, like crafting a trade, which I keep finding that a little bit funny. Like it took you guys a month to find the compensation to trade for Zach Wilson, right? So there's a definite need, I feel like, for the Broncos of having a deep quarterback room. And I feel like it's in the best interest going forward for Zach to take his lumps, just continue to be that sponge and be that third quarterback for the Broncos from week 1 all the way to week 18.
Mohammed, what's your thoughts?
Well, with Zach Wilson, I was a little disappointed. I always I liked him coming out of college, and I just thought he didn't get like a fair chance. And I was thinking, well, now he got Sean Payton. I might start seeing some improvements and stuff. And I was kind of surprised that he's not. Now you could say it's still too early. Maybe he will at some point. Because I honestly thought it'll be like two quarterbacks. It'll be like Bo Nix and Wilson, and maybe Jared Stidham will be cut, at some point. But right now it doesn't seem that way. But um, I think Bo Nix should start. I think he will start. I mean, there's no reason to have him sit come week one. especially now since him and Jared Stidham are about the same. Um, but we shall see. If he continues to play like that, I could see the Broncos maybe cutting him, and it's his last chance. I mean, if you're with Sean Payton, you're not getting it. No team is going to think anything of you. So that's what I think.
Yeah, well, I kind of on the train of I know they traded for Zach Wilson, like you said, Cameron. It took them like a month to come up with the compensation. I feel like at that time, like I'm sure they were thinking like maybe Bo Nix ain't gonna be there because I mean, with so many teams in this year's draft, like a lot of them needed quarterbacks, and maybe they were worried someone's gonna trade up, maybe take Bo Nix, maybe take Penix. I mean that happened. We didn't expect the Falcons to take him, but they did. And then, of course, JJ going to the Vikings. I think they traded for Zach Wilson to add, like you said, depth to the quarterback room just in case they couldn't get one of those guys, like a Bo Nix or a Penix. And maybe they took a Rattler later in the round somewhere. But now, I don't know. Like, I feel like Sean Payton, it'd be nice to have 3 quarterbacks on the roster, but we actually talked about this a couple of weeks ago, Cameron, that the fact that I think the NFL has got that new rule now to where – you can elevate a quarterback on game day and it won't take up a roster spot, because of all the stuff last year. I think it was the Brock Purdy thing a couple of postseasons ago whenever he got hurt and the 49ers literally had no quarterback to play. Both their quarterbacks got hurt. And I mean, it'd be nice to carry 3, but I don't think Sean Payton's going to with that rule in place. I think he would take that roster spot and put it somewhere else, like maybe another tight end, receiver, maybe an extra defensive lineman or pass rusher, something of that nature. And I shouldn't say I really liked the Zach Wilson trade. I understood it, but also at the same time, I want him to do good myself for the simple fact that maybe, we carry 3 quarterbacks and then maybe midway through the season, kind of like last year, a team is desperate for a quarterback midseason. Like their quarterback gets hurt, kind of like the Vikings last year, and they went out and I think what was his name? Dobbs, I think his name was. They went out and traded for him, and they traded, I think it was like a 5th or a 4th to get him because they desperately needed a quarterback. That'd be nice to have that during midseason. Team comes knocking, hey, we'll give you a 4th for Zach Wilson, and you get another asset to pick up. But I don't think he's going to be on the roster come week 1. I really don't. I think it's going to be Stidham. And that's saying a lot because they can cut Stidham now or by the start of the season and save $5 million in cap. I saw a report the other day that they only have $7 million in cap right now. Mm-hmm. So if they can get another 5, I think that would really be good for them. I think they'd like that. But if Zach Wilson can't take that backup role from Stidham, they're going to have to ride with Stidham and Bo Nix. I agree, Mohamed. I do believe Bo Nix is going to be the starter week 1 since him and Stidham are like right here together.
Exactly.
There's if he gets through, like if they're dead even by the start of the season, there's no reason why not to start Bo Nix. Who do you think was going to be, or who do you think is going to be the starter come week 1, Cameron?
It's Bo. I mean, it's I feel like at this point, if you say Jarrett Stidham's going to be the week 1 starter or Zach Wilson's going to be the week 1 starter, you just want to be a contrarian at this point. Like, like it's trending in the direction of Bo, and it has been, and he's, I mean, frankly, he really was their guy. He really was their guy for week 1, and so week 1 starter, everything. The moment they drafted him, right? And that's the moment he became the week 1 starter, at least off the naked eye, right? Off the naked eye. But I mean, as far as like, and when just real quick, when you talked about Zach Wilson, it's like I was referring more so onto the trade was just like we're also talking about Zach Wilson. So the fact it took a month is just more puzzling to me. I mean, I know exactly why they made the trade is to really cover their butts in essence with the draft upcoming and everything. It's interesting to me. It's like it took you guys a month to figure out a Zach Wilson trade, a guy who's really not done a whole lot in the in the NFL and everything, and so it's just so were the Jets just really driving a hard bargain or what? So but no, I just think that Bo Nix is really going to call it cautious optimism, truly, but I just think he's really going to lift, I think, a lot of the spirits within that room. He's, he really seems to be, born to be that type of, quarterback that Sean has been really looking for. And yeah, I think it's all but trending, the way the week one starter. And I don't even hate the idea with what Sean has been doing, which is, alternating the reps. And at least this early on, I think once you get to the training camp and especially preseason especially, not just the quarterback position, but any sort of position groups, is that's when you'll really start to see a lot of players really separate from the crowd. And I really think you'll see, Bo Nix really kind of become that guy. And frankly, it seems like he's that guy right now with the fact that with what we've been reading up on so far, even into OTAs and rookie minicamp.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people, like I said, I've been seeing over the past couple of weeks that, the quarterback battle, like you could say there's one going on right now in OTAs, but a lot of people are saying, oh, no, it's not really going to start until mandatory minicamp. But I agree. Like, there's no reason. Like, I was actually talking to Mohamed about this last night that if you look at all the quarterbacks that were drafted in the first round this year, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, JJ, Penix, Bo Nix, out of all those quarterbacks, like 2 of them went to offensive coaches. I don't really like a young rookie quarterback going to a defensive guy, a defensive-minded head coach, because I don't see – it doesn't really work out too well most of the time. And JJ went to the Vikings with O'Connell, and you got Bo Nix here in Denver with Sean Payton. And I was saying that it's a strong possibility that maybe Bo Nix and Caleb Williams is going to start week 1 regardless. We know that. He's going to be the starter in Chicago. All the other quarterbacks outside of Bo Nix that were drafted in the first round, you can make an argument they might not even start this season. Mm-hmm. They might be on the bench, learning. Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Penix for sure, and JJ. So I believe, Bo Nix is probably the most, like everybody knows, he's the most pro-ready quarterback. He's the oldest. He's the most mature. He's got one of the best coaches in the game. It makes sense to start him. Like, unless he comes out in training camp or preseason and falls flat on his face or gets injured, knock on wood, he should be the starter week 1. And I wanted to dive into the next topic that we got here. Courtland Sutton came out last week on DMVR and was like, I will be at mandatory minicamp. And that's good. I think personally that's really good for Bo Nix. Like, now he's got that weapon. They can start developing timing together, chemistry. What are your thoughts on that, Cameron? And then we'll get to you, Mohamed.
It's always beneficial when you can have a guy like Courtland Sutton really show up at, minicamp, whether it was voluntary or whether it's, mandatory. It still hurts me a little bit that he really wasn't showing up for voluntary, minicamp. But I made this point, a few times on 5280. It said, we're not in those rooms. We are not in those rooms to have the conversations of, okay, this is why Sutton has not been appearing at, voluntary minicamp. To really have those conversations. And if there was a preconceived conversation and understanding, and we even had Kliss even on the show for Manely, and he really did seem rather confident in the idea that, that Sutton was, going to be remaining a Denver Bronco. And not just that, obviously, but he probably was going to end up showing for mandatory minicamp. And as such, that ended up being the case. And so I think that, for the wide receiver room, I don't know how much it lifts it in general, but we know that the appearance of Sutton within the wide receiver room is very beneficial for that group. Because I don't know if the way I'll say that, the way I'll say this is, I don't know if it lifts the ceiling of the team in terms of the wide receiver room, but it definitely makes them better for sure within the wide receiver room. And, Sutton is a wide receiver, and we maybe briefly mentioned his name on Manly Broncos last week in terms of players to prove. He really does have a lot to prove. Maybe not so much of the fact that, that he does have this year or next year on his contract, but it's just like, you wanted a new contract, buddy. Like you wanted a new contract. So in order for you to truly ask and receive a new contract is to actually play and, warrant the possible contract that you might be getting, this next off season. So go out, put together your 1,000-yard season that actually makes you qualify for a 20 plus, 25 million plus deal, or less than that, deal that makes you, at least in the 20 million range for a wide receiver. So do that, and then you actually will finally maybe at that point feel rightly compensated.
Mohamed?
Yeah, to me it was like a big relief. I saw the interview and wasn't really sure about his like what he was thinking, like Cameron mentioned. But from the interview, his energy was very positive. I'm glad he's coming. He's gonna be back, and Bo Nix could get all the help that he can get. And he's a veteran. Um, I think the Broncos, if he's not really asking for much, might as well just do it. Maybe give him like 1 million or something. Just see how it goes this year. And like you said, Cameron, if he does actually, get like 1,000 yards or something, yeah, then you can get your contract.
My only pushback, just unfortunately, there is if he's been asking for 2 to 3 million, which has been the rumor, right? I feel like the Broncos would have already asked for that, or they would have already gotten something done at that point. Because 2 or 3 million more is not that much, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I have this feeling like he's asking in the 22s to the 23s, million, a year range, and that is quite steep.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And that is quite steep, and that's obviously an assumption on my part. So take that for what it's worth, but. For me, it's like if he's only asking for 2 to 3 million, I just feel like he would have already been done by now.
Interesting point.
I get what you're saying, Cameron, but maybe they're waiting on that because I'm not saying it's true or not true because I'm not sure. I'm not in there, but I think maybe they are waiting because they can wait until like training camp and preseason whenever they have to get to the point where they have to cut down their 53-man roster. Maybe they'll wait until then to when they can cut some guys, save some cap money. Like I said, they only got $7 million in cap space right now. Maybe they're waiting until they can cut some guys, get some more money on the books, and maybe that right before the season they give them that $2-3 million pay bump. I don't know, but I think it's more likely that, of course, Sutton plays this year, and I think he's looking for one last big contract before he hits 30. I mean, what is he now, 28? By the end of the season I think he'll be 29, so he's looking for another big contract, I believe, before he hits 30. And I don't know, I just feel like with a lot of the young guys, I mean, they brought Reynolds in. I think they signed him to like a 2 or 3 year deal, so he'll be here for a few years. And Tim Patrick, I know we're still hoping and praying that he can stay healthy for this year and maybe beyond. And then you still got Marvin Mims, and you drafted Troy Franklin for Bo Nix. And I just have a feeling at the end of the season, I don't think Cortland Sutton's going to be a Bronco anymore. I hate to say it, but I think next offseason, granted, the Broncos are going to have like $100 million in cap space next year. So they could, if they wanted to, in retrospect, they could sign Sutton to another long-term deal. But I don't think they are because they got Quinn Miners they got to pay. They got to figure out what they're doing at left tackle because I'm pretty sure this year or next year is Garrett Bowles' last year on the books. So they got to figure out what they're doing at left tackle, if they're going to pay him or go get someone else. Baron Browning, Surtain's coming up. He's going to want a, payday. I think that's the reason why they brought Reynolds in, for a couple of years. And that way Sutton, he can go, or maybe they trade him next offseason. I don't know. Maybe get a draft pick out of him or something. I hate to say it. I just don't think he's going to be here after 2024. But as long as he's here now and help Bo Nix develop, that's what I'm concerned with.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure Mohamed has kind of, listened to Manly Broncos at times, with this, but I've been kind of on this drum with the whole Sutton, and I don't mean to take it to a route with Sutton, and he's showing up for mandatory minicamp. That it is what it is at this point. But to take you guys through a little bit as far as my thought process, why it was so frustrating was the whole idea with what he was presenting this year. It was just so puzzling. You have 2 years remaining on your contract, and and especially for the Broncos, who they really are if they decide to move on from even Sutton this year, it's only a couple million in guaranteed money that they can get off the books. So like they could potentially easily get off of the books this year. So it's such a sketchy proposition from him, meaning Sutton, this year, because they can easily move on from him, and you got to call it for what it is. They brought Josh Reynolds in. They re-brought Tim Patrick in, and his production, for what we've seen over the course of his time in Denver, really putting aside 2019, it's been rather pedestrian numbers from Sutton, if we're being completely honest. And so Josh Reynolds and Tim Patrick, you easily can fulfill production possibly with guys like Reynolds and even Patrick, praying obviously Patrick is healthy for 2024. But Reynolds and Patrick can easily replicate that production for 2024, and Reynolds is on a 2-year deal. So, and because of that, and because he wasn't showing up for voluntary minicamp, he's also now at a disadvantage practice-wise because he wasn't working out with Bo Nix, or he wasn't working with, Jarrett Stidham, and he wasn't working with Zach Wilson. He wasn't working with some of these wide receivers. He wasn't working with his wide receiver coach, I would imagine. I'm sure that they've had conversations, but I just feel like he's at a much more, disadvantage now going into, mandatory minicamp. But at the end of the day, if he goes out and he balls out, once he gets the mandatory minicamp and he looks healthy and has a great preseason and has a great 2024 season, the rest is history at that point.
Yeah, I don't know. I just, like you said, I just feel like, his time in Denver's up after this year. Like you said, him coming in and just getting that timing, that chemistry down with Bo Nix to help Bo Nix grow, I think that's really going to be helpful because, like, he is a true number one. But I think the reason why he stayed out of voluntaries and why he asking for $2-3 million is because I'm pretty sure they said that he doesn't have any more guaranteed money right now on his contract. So that's why he was doing it. Like, now I understand he doesn't want to go out there, not have the guarantees, and maybe get hurt in practice or, in the season and not have any kind of money behind him, because that would kind of, put him down because, like I said, he's almost 30. I mean, no team, next year if he's coming off an injury, So I hate to see Sutton go. I really do. But as long as he's here for 2024, I'd say give him, like, if it is true that if he's asking for more than, and you don't plan on keeping him after this year, just trade him already. Get rid of him. Just let him go.
Yeah.
But if he truly wants only $2 or $3 million to, just have some guaranteed money, just give it to him. I'm sorry, but to me, $2 to $3 million is a small price to pay to give your rookie quarterback a true number one to develop correctly. That way, I'm not saying Josh Reynolds, can't, and Tim Patrick together, like you said, Cameron, can't be that combination to help Bo Nix, develop. But I'd rather have a true number one receiver in Cortland Sutton. And, there's probably going to be a big battle going on, in the wide receiver room. Maybe not with Sutton. He's going to be the starter. He's going to be the number one. But if Tim Patrick comes back healthy enough and he stays healthy, there could be a battle for that position too, between Reynolds and Tim Patrick. I think they're personally, I told Mohamed this a couple of weeks ago, I think they're going to carry 6 wide receivers this year. Last year they carried 5. I think this year, with Russell gone, and they're going to probably want to throw the ball short, intermediate routes with Bo Nix over the middle. They're going to try to carry 6 wide receivers, and there could be a battle, for that 5 or 6 spot too, like with little Jordan Humphrey, Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, maybe even Brandon Johnson, Jalen Virgil. There's probably going to be a, battle in, this is all probably going to start in minicamp, battle for the pass rushing room too. Ellis, Cooper, Benito, Baron Browning, out of all these battles, which ones are you looking forward to this year, Cameron?
There are some great battles, in training camp and even mandatory minicamp right now. And you really don't need to look no further than the running back position, in my opinion. The running back position is probably the number one that I'm kind of looking at right now. We talk about, possibly, players who are cap casualties. We somewhat talked a little about it in terms of with Sutton, possibly. Maybe he's a cut or a trade. But if you're maybe a little bit more confident on, players that are cap casualties, you don't need to look no further. As hard and painful as it is, than Samaje Perine or possibly even Javonte Williams, as it pains me to even say. You know, but those are both backs that are on expiring contracts, and Javonte, he's got a lot to prove. There was a small stretch there in 2023 where it seemed like he was really starting to, see his form again. But then for the majority of the season and near the end of the season, it was like he was just reading a brick wall. Like the vision was just not there, in the regular season. And so he was just really struggling, and calling it for what it is, Samaje Perine was actually the best back amongst all the three of them last year. But the reason why he's on the block, well, they drafted by chance a guy from Notre Dame who just so happens to be roughly the same size and build as Perine, and if you can possibly replicate the same type of production or close to the production of what Samaje did with a guy who's only 20 years old and built like a rock, and especially a position that is a turnstile and unfortunately one that is easily replaced, then Estime is certainly the one that you probably going to be banking on that's going to be replacing Samaje. But the one that it will always really kind of catch my eye, and this is really the battle that it will catch my eye in the running back position. Look, this is another name that will unfortunately hurt Bronco fans because we all love the underdog story. We've loved it with Phillip Lindsay and everything. But Blake Watson versus Jaleel McLaughlin. We really need to keep an eye on Blake Watson. Like, we really need to keep a close eye on Blake Watson. He's a bit bigger than Jaleel. He's actually built of the same cloth from Antonio Gibson from Memphis. He's a former wide receiver, converted running back. He's got so much versatility to his game. So I would not be surprised if 2025 you are actually talking about a running back room where they actually carry maybe Javonte. I feel like it's going to end up probably being an audition tape if you feel like maybe between Javonte and Samaje, between who they hold on to. But you're probably looking at maybe they keep Javonte, right? They keep Javonte, but then they roll with Estime, Jaleel, and Blake Watson in 2025. And then in 2026, when you're really starting to talk about Blake Watson and Jaleel McLaughlin and Audric Estime as your true workhorse backs, for the formidable future with Sean Payton. So, but Blake Watson is the true dark horse running back for me in that entire running back room. He's got 3 down back potential.
Yep. What about you, Mohamed? What battle are you looking forward to?
Kind of agree with you, Cameron. I'm a huge fan of Estime. And, I talked to Eddie before about the combination between Williams and Estime. I think Estime is probably going to be number 1 running back at some point. It's just the way he's built, the way he runs. Another battle would be I kind of like Jonah Ellis, the edge rusher. I think he might beat all of them, to be honest with you. I mean, from what I'm hearing now, this guy is a steal on the 3rd round. But I guess only time will tell. But those are the only 2 that I was thinking about.
Yeah. Well, I like the takes on the running back room, and I'll get to that in a minute. But my one I'm looking forward to is the pass rushing room, because I just, like Mohamed said, everything you hear out of OTAs was Ellis was just tearing it up. He was always in the back. Him and Nick Benito, honestly, were always in the backfield, consistently in the backfield. And I mean, I hope Nick Benito pops this year. I really do, because he was supposed to pop back.
I was going to say, you're hearing more good things again with Benito this year.
Yeah, and I was really hoping he would take that step forward last year, and he really didn't. I mean, he had an okay year, but he didn't take that big step forward like I wanted him to last year. And Ellis, I do believe, maybe not at the start of the season, but by mid part of the season, I believe he will be the number one pass rusher on this team. I think he'll outperform Baron Browning. And, I wouldn't be surprised. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he starts the season, Ellis. It'd be Baron Browning and Ellis, the starting outside pass rushers. I would not be surprised in the slightest that happened. But just like I said, all the things you hear coming out of camp and OTAs about him just constantly being in the backfield and not just getting after the passer, but stopping the run too. They've been saying that he's been, a beast at getting at the running backs, just shedding this tackle and getting to the back to, stop them. And that's something we could really use, because God forbid, the last couple of years, we have not been very good in the run game on defense at all. Yeah. And if Ellis can help with that, I'm all for it. If he can get after the passer and stop the run, that's what you need. But that's the battle I'm looking forward to. But as I wanted to touch on this too before we move on, the running back battle. Like, I like what you said, Cameron. I really do. And I have a feeling by the end of the season, because Javonte last year, I think, like you said, he was good in a stretch there. But then towards the end of the season, it was just kind of like, where is he? And I remember reading an article the other day saying he was only rushing for like 4.4 yards a carry last year on average.
That's actually not that bad, but
it's not bad, but it's not the same Javonte we saw in his rookie season before he got hurt. Yeah. The guy would literally carry 6 defenders on his back for an extra 3-4 yards.
Yeah.
And I know that they had this conversation about Sutton a few years back after he tore his ACL. It takes a player usually about 2 years to fully trust that leg again before they can return to form. And honestly, Sutton hasn't been a 1,000-yard receiver, but in 2022, he started looking like he trusted that leg more. He was doing he was cutting more. He was, playing better, even though he didn't get as many touchdowns. But even last year, he was playing great. 10 touchdowns. I think he was 3rd or 4th, ranked for touchdowns last year. So maybe this year, Javonte will fully trust that knee and he'll go back to form, hopefully, fingers crossed. And that'd be nice. I was telling Mohamed, in December and November football, you want backs that can run the ball, because that's what you're going to do when it's cold. If you got 2 bowling ball backs, Estime and Javonte, and they're both
3 technically.
Yeah, no one's going to want to tackle. Nobody.
Well, and to piggyback a little bit too off of, the pass rush room, I really like the correlation in terms of even these camp battles of, the wide receiver position and the edge room. Because if you actually look at them, both of them, they are very much identical, because they really lack the identity of a number one. They really do. I don't think Sutton is a true number one. I really, really don't. I think maybe some teams, if you're lucky, he could be a wide receiver 1. But he's wide receiver 2, and it just feels like the Broncos wide receiver room is just full of number 2s, and the Broncos edge room is full of number 2s, right? Number 2s. But I think the thing with the Broncos edge room and with some of the people within the wide receiver room is that there are a couple players that possibly could step up and be a number 1 edge, right? A number 1 edge. Guys like Jonah Ellis, Baron Browning, Jonathan Cooper. I actually will push back a little bit. I actually feel like Nick Benito actually had a really good year. I mean, all things considered, no one was expecting hardly anything from him, really in 2023, and he burst onto the scene, and a lot of that had to do with really his pass rush specialist, Jamar Cain, being in the building. For anybody that doesn't know, Cain was at Oklahoma when Benito was there, when he was really doing a lot of damage at the Big 12 level, where he was top 5 nationally in the NCAA in terms of pass rush win rate. And we know that specifically pass rush win rate is one of the more successful statistics that translates to the next level. It's almost like rebounding in basketball. If you can rebound at the next level or rebound in college, you're more than likely going to be able to rebound in the NBA. If you are winning and have a very good first step, you're going to, win your rep more often than not. The question is just, can you, seal the deal, if you will. So Benito, I feel like, is one of those guys that has a tendency to really raise that ceiling. Jonathan Cooper, I've loved this comparison that was done in the past before. It was done by either Frankie Abbott or Joey Richards of Let's Talk Broncos, but they made this comparison of Cooper is the Tim Patrick of the room, right? And I think it's a brilliant comparison because he's Mr. Consistent. He's Mr. Consistent. He gets the job done in terms of being so consistent. But he's not flashy, right? And that's the thing with Tim Patrick. He's not flashy. But then you go to Baron Browning, and then I feel like that's the one for me that has the opportunity to. He and Jonah Ellis, I feel like, are the ones where they can really raise the ceiling of that room, because you're talking about Browning, who we've seen the array of pass rush moves. Like, there's a reason why at one point I maybe got a little bit too ahead of myself, but there were times where you saw what Browning was doing on the football field, and like, this guy literally looks like a spinning image of Von Miller out there. Like the way that he would move, do his dips, dip under the tackles, even the spin moves, or his own version of a pass rush juke, if you will, to get to the quarterback. Like, there were times where you were just like in awe, like, this guy just looks like Von Miller. The unfortunate thing is he just can't stay on the field. And if he could be able to put together, a really good season where, he's able to get to the quarterback and actually have a 10 sack season, I don't think it would be surprising. And frankly, I don't think it's at all surprising for me if there are at least a couple players potential wise of who they are in the room that they actually do have 10 sack potential. And that would be guys like Jonah Ellis and Baron Browning. Ellis, particularly when he was at Utah, he had 9 sacks for like a stretch of 4 games in 2023, where, from like UCLA all the way down to USC for like a 4-game stretch, he had like 2 sacks, 3 sacks, 2 sacks, and another sack game here and there. He was uber productive in that stretch. And for the Broncos' sake, they've never had anybody that has been able to take over games specifically like that since Von Miller. And so if they can have that, I think that it is going to be very much needed, for this team. And obviously I'm running a bit long-winded, but in terms of the wide receiver room, that's when it gets a bit interesting. And one of the reasons why you probably want to look specifically at a guy like Troy Franklin and the chemistry with, Bo Nix, right? And chemistry is a really big thing with the quarterback position. We know that, the Broncos maybe went about it at a very unorthodox way as far as, pairing the wide receiver with the quarterback, because you typically see it that very next year, right? That they pair the wide receiver with the quarterback that they recently just had, not necessarily that year, or let alone in the 4th round. And I think the Broncos lucked out on that. But Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims are really the 2 guys for me that I just can really raise the ceiling of that entire room. Specifically the speed, the way that they can operate. And I've said this before on multiple different podcasts now, but I feel like we are looking at this possibly entirely wrong with how things could shake out within terms of the offense. And that is, I think they will run the ball, right? I think they will run the ball, but I think that we are going to see this Broncos offense the way that Sean Payton has truly wanted to operate, which is, you will actually see 10, 11, 12 targets actually get the football, new targets, should I say, not just, 10 to 12 targets to a running back in one game. No, I'm talking about like, 10 to 12 actual targets to, Troy Franklin, Tim Patrick, Courtland Sutton, Marvin Mims, Josh Reynolds, all these different options now that they have at their disposal. You will finally get the chance to see a true surgical, at least intentional offense where they can be able to hit their targets, hit their tight ends, and get to the point where, you are starting to see truly what the Sean Payton offense was intended for.
I kind of have to push back on that a little bit. I think, like you said, they're going to probably run the ball more. I don't think so. I think they're going to pass more because I think, I mean, even Mohamed kind of went back and forth on this a little bit. I feel like the Broncos could possibly make the playoffs this year. I mean, I think it's a possibility just with everything you hear coming out of OTAs. And I understand it's practice, but I just feel like this year is an evaluation year for young talent like Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, Bo Nix, Ellis, maybe even Nick Benito, and all these young guys. Just an evaluation year. And I feel like Sean Payton's going to want to see what Bo Nix can do. And I think we're going to probably see. I'm not saying it's going to be like drastically, like, oh, it's going to be they're going to be throwing it 90 times and running it 10% of the time and 90% of the time throwing it. I think it's going to be about maybe a 60-40, maybe like a 70-30 that they're throwing the ball. Just because they just want to see what Bo Nix is. They have to figure it out. I mean, it could take them a few years to develop, but like as long as you're seeing progress throughout the year, I think that's what Sean Payton wants to see. And we know, like, I mean, yeah, they brought back the fullback, Michael Burton. So I do believe they're probably going to run. I think it's going to be more of a 60-40 type of thing. 60% of the time they're going to throw, 40% of the time they're going to run. Because we know Sean Payton loves to run the ball in November and December when it gets cold outside. Especially, that, late season football, run the ball. A lot of teams don't want to tackle when it's cold outside. They want to, just please pass, that way maybe we can get a breakup or something or whatever. But, what do you think, Mohamed? Out of all this quarterback or all these positions that we talked about, what do you think about the receiver, pass rushing room and all that?
I think the receiving room is kind of interesting because I kind of agree with you, Cameron, that they're mostly like a number twos. Kind of excited to see what Troy Franklin is going to do since he's got that connection with Bo Nix. Mims coming back this year. I mean, last year he did a lot of return and didn't really get to play as much. So kind of looking forward to see what would happen this season with that. Cortland Sutton, I don't know. He didn't really play like he didn't, he wasn't on a training or anything. So we shall see with mini training camp what happens. But yeah, those are the only two I was thinking about.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, the next thing I want to talk about that we had for tonight was where do you think Justin Simmons is going to go? We kind of talked about this last night a little bit, Mohamed, sorry. But Graham was involved in that conversation too. But I personally think he's going to sign with the Eagles. Reunite with Vic Fangio. I think that'd be the best thing for him. And I know the Eagles, they drastically, really worked on their secondary during the draft and free agency this year. But I think if they had Justin Simmons, that would really help them. And reunite with Vic Fangio would really help Simmons. Where do you guys think he's going to go? Cameron?
I don't think it's the Eagles. I actually do not think it's the Eagles. I've actually heard that he and Vic Fangio didn't really exactly mesh well. And actually the reason why he would actually go to the Eagles would actually be more so Christian Parker and not Vic Fangio. Since Christian Parker is there now. I mean, I'm curious to see certainly what it is that he's going to do. I mean, I think, there's a bit of a misconception going around, in the sense that, the Broncos did him dirty and, they let him go. And look, I mean, the fact of the matter is there's a lot to peel back there in the sense that, like, we're Bronco fans. We always want our favorite player to stay as a member of the Denver Bronco or a member of the Denver Broncos, right? I mean, we didn't get a chance to see it with Demaryius Thomas, right? I mean, it was a gut punch to see him traded, to the Houston Texans, or to see Von Miller be traded, mid-season to the Los Angeles Rams, So, but unfortunately, in this day and age of not just the NFL but sports, is you don't see favorite players necessarily stay on with your team as much. I mean, if there's really any sport that you could possibly see it, it's baseball, right? And baseball or even basketball, lately. And so but as far as, with what the Broncos are going to do, I think he's really just been waiting it out. I think he's just going to be waiting it out. He wants to go to a contender. And for what the Broncos did, they just, they wanted to, rather than trade him and get something for him, they cut ties with him so that he could make the decision himself to actually be like, I want to decide to sign here. When you're trading, it's a bit of a sticky situation because you don't, the player may not necessarily be as involved in the decision of actually going, to some location, right? So if you're releasing a guy now, you're affording him the opportunity to choose the place of his, choosing, if you will, in terms of his next destination. So I think it's very clear that he's, when you've been with the team for about 8 years and the quarterback play has been less than desirable, they've not made the playoffs either. He wants to go to a contending team. Doesn't necessarily matter if it's the AFC or NFC. Ideally, as a Bronco fan, I'm sure all of us would love it if it's in the NFC.
Not the Chiefs.
Right. That would be divisional too. That would be quite a sucker punch. But I have a couple places in mind. I think Indianapolis would certainly make some sense as far as a team that that can go out and sign him. And I actually think the rookie safety just sustained a pretty significant injury, so it wouldn't be surprised if they we're calling Justin to see if he can sign there. The Dallas Cowboys. Possibly a name. I actually, kudos to Mario. And ever since that he said this on his show, it's just been something that I've been always pondering. And that is, Mario mentioned that his dad was a huge Cowboys fan. And as we all know, Justin lost his dad last year. And so I'm sure one of the things that would do would kind of do right with them and with the family would be playing for kind of his dad's favorite team, right? And so I wouldn't be surprised if he signed there. And of course, the other one, is going back home, and playing for the Miami Dolphins, and especially a team that is super fast and athletic and. With how they play, I think adding his athleticism specifically to the, to that room, I think would be fantastic. So Miami, Dallas, and Indianapolis are the three teams that I'm looking out for.
What about you, Mohamed? Where do you think he's going to sign?
I honestly thought the Eagles might make more sense, since the connection with Fangio. I didn't know about this whole thing with him and Fangio, Cameron, but as long as he doesn't stay in our division, like Raiders, that would be terrible. I was really surprised that nobody actually signed him. Seriously, he's a good, I don't understand, but maybe he's just waiting it out, to see somebody gets injured when the season starts and can go in. But I hope he goes to somewhere where he can maybe win a championship or something. He deserves that. He's a good guy.
And I actually think that's all he's doing is he's waiting it out. And this is the first time he's been a free agent. And he actually talked about that in his, I think it was the March for Peace interview when he was doing the, he's actually talked about that. He's just letting the whole process, take its time. And, it's the first time, like I said, he's the first time that he's been an NFL free agent, and he's really just letting the process play out. And, I wouldn't even be surprised if he ends up being a little bit of a later, right? A little bit of a later training camp signing. And, I think the good thing is when you're first time being an NFL free agent, it affords you to make up for lost time on something that is, a big thing, and these guys are families too. These guys have families too, right? And so getting the chance to spend it with family and, and everything too has been a really big thing for him.
Yeah, I like to push back on that again. I just the Dolphins, you could say they're a contender, but I don't think they are. I think last year they didn't do well against playoff teams at all. I think they went 1-5 against playoff teams. Maybe they make the playoffs this year, maybe. I still think the Bills win that division. The Cowboys, they'll make the playoffs with the Cowboys for sure. I have no doubt in my mind, but it's just, will they get any farther than the divisional round? I think Simmons wants to chase a ring. I mean, he's got his money from the Broncos. He's probably going to get another nice contract with whoever he signs with next, even though he's 31. I think someone will pay him nice. Maybe not top of the market, safety money, but pretty close. That's why I think the Eagles make the most sense. Yeah, I didn't know about his father with the Dallas Cowboys. It's possible he could sign there. Maybe he's just happy making the playoffs. But I feel like if he wanted to make like a Super Bowl run, maybe try to get a ring, the Eagles to me make the most sense. Yeah, I understand him and Fangio didn't get, they didn't really mesh well. But like you said, Cameron, with Parker there, I think that'd be enough for him. He knows the system for Fangio, and that's one team we can all agree on. They're probably out of all those teams we mentioned are probably the main one to make the Super Bowl out of Miami, Dallas, and the Colts.
Sure. Yeah, I will say there's a difference with the question of where we think he will sign, versus like where we actually want him to sign. So
Yeah.
I mentioned Miami, and I mentioned Dallas, and I mentioned Indianapolis, right? Where I would want him to sign is I actually want him to sign where I actually want him to sign is San Francisco and Detroit. Those are the two teams that I actually would love to see him go to. Detroit, they've got a aggressive defense with, Aaron Glenn, up and coming team. It's pretty clear they are actually maybe in a vulnerable, division where they can actually run away with it possibly. And and then San Francisco, I think San Francisco is the one fascinating, I feel like, team, in the whole discussion for Justin, because Hufanga was injured. He tore his ACL at the latter part of last year. He's a very versatile safety, and maybe some people may not remember this, but it wasn't necessarily Justin was a huge fan of, but when you're a part of a contending team, you could kind of tweak the rules a little bit and play, and help your team win. But with Vance Joseph, funny enough, but as a head coach, when Vance was a head coach, he played Justin at like 3 or 4 different positions. I think he had him at cornerback at some point. He had him at nickel corner. He had him at safety, strong safety, box safety. Like he had him in a couple different places. And I think something like that would do a good service for the 49ers, because we know that they have the positionless offense, right? But I mean, a positionless player like that for Justin, I think would be really beneficial for him. And Hufanga's injury, I think, at least gives them enough wiggle room. I know they drafted Mustafa from was a Wake Forest, but he's a rookie. And what better even person to bring into the mold where you could bring Simmons into that. And also it actually fits with what the 49ers would want to do, which is actually bolster their superstar team. They've done that before. They traded for Randy Gregory, right? They brought in Chase Young for like an audition, right? So, I mean, they've done, kind of stuff like that before. So I would not be in the least bit shocked if they went out and actually got, Justin. Plus, it would be great to put a 49ers, Simmons, jersey over there in the back over there versus a Kansas City Chiefs uniform.
Oh my God! Yeah.
That done.
Yeah, I know.
No, but I do like what you said. Like, that's another team. Like, I kind of thought about was him going to Detroit. Like, we know that they really used the draft this year to bolster their secondary, because that was their main problem last year in Detroit was their secondary. They, their corners, their safeties. I would really like that him to go to Detroit, and if he could help them win a ring, that'd be nice, because of the simple fact that if the Broncos ain't in the Super Bowl every year, as long as it's and the Chiefs, that's a whole different story. I hate them with every bone in my body, but if the Broncos ain't in the Super Bowl, I'm rooting for whichever team in the playoffs has never won a Super Bowl before, outside of the Chargers. Like Detroit last year, that was the one team I really wanted to make the Super Bowl and win it. And if Simmons can go there and help them win and get a Super Bowl ring in himself, just like Von Miller went to the Rams, which, that was great. I loved watching Von Miller win that Super Bowl ring and getting the second one. But yeah, the Lions, if it's not the Eagles, I'd rather him go to the Lions, honestly, help them win a ring. So
I feel like it's a different conversation when we're talking about like where we think he will sign versus where we want him to sign, because it's a very different conversation of, so and I will say this. I know that Tennessee was a team that was linked to him. I don't know if I like that overall as a fit. Just in terms of
they're not a contender at all.
Yeah.
They made contending moves. I mean, credit where credit is due. They, in this particular offseason and everything, they've made contending moves and everything, to bolster that team. But I will say, I just want something that is. Let me actually just phrase it this way. I will admittedly have my first non-Denver Broncos jersey wherever Justin Simmons goes. Is that, if it's with the 49ers, I will probably end up getting a Justin Simmons 49ers jersey. Or if he goes and, signs with the Eagles, I will get a nice, what is it? The classic, green, eagle green, uniform. If he does sign with Tennessee, I will definitely be getting the Houston Oilers uniform, the classic throwback Houston Oilers uniform, with Justin Simmons on the back. So absolutely, I will be rocking Justin Simmons in non-Denver Broncos uniform.
Yeah, that's a big thing for me. Like my mom, she got a Von Miller jersey that was a Rams jersey because the Rams used to be in St. Louis, which is where I grew up, and she got one. And even though they're in Los Angeles now, and they were in there whenever they won the Super Bowl, she got that Von Miller jersey. But the last thing I wanted to touch on tonight before we get out of here, guys, is what do you think of the Randy Gregory suing the Denver Broncos? What are your thoughts on that, Cameron?
Go Big Red for first. Me being a Husker fan, right, with Randy Gregory. It's what we should preface it this way: he's not necessarily suing the Broncos. He's suing the NFL. And I think there's a chance he could win it, because he could win this suit because this particular suit that he's suing him for is about THC. It's about the weed, right? And that is something that the NFL has lessened, in the last couple of years, and not made as much of a deal, or as much of a deal in the past. Then because it's been such a huge bugaboo with us, and then with the microphone that we have, and that, why are they suspending this person for smoking weed for like 8 games, and this person got assault, why are we suspending him for like only 3 games? So right, and so there was a much to do about all of that. But I think to a certain degree, I really do kind of side with Gregory on this, because especially for someone who I'm not trying to say I struggle with the antidepressants, or something, or even the learning difference. I have a learning difference. I have a learning disability myself, but I know that there are certain things that does help with your learning difference, and that was the thing that he helped, that had really helped him in terms of the antidepressants, and especially his the THC, or the weed, right? And so and that was one of the big things that Jerry Jones specifically was really big for him with, in terms of the with the Dallas Cowboys, is that he really kept him in check in terms of being almost a mentor to him, if you will, just someone that he can talk to. And it really it was almost like a second son, if you will. And that's one of the reasons why Dallas was such a snake bitten, why he, thought that he was going to sign with Dallas and ended up signing with Denver. So I kind of side with it a little bit, for Randy to a degree, in the sense that we're talking about THC, we're talking about weed, which is in the sense that to a much lesser degree now is not as big of a deal in the NFL anymore.
Yeah, I agree. What do you think, Mohamed?
Honestly, Cameron, I thought it was kind of ridiculous when I actually saw the lawsuit and all that. I'm like, you're just not gonna win that. But maybe even if he doesn't win, maybe that'll bring a light, and
more light, yeah.
yeah, like more light. The NFL will talk about it, and maybe something will happen with that. Because you're right. I mean, a lot of places is legal, and players need it for different things, right? So managing pain and all that. So maybe that'll make some changes to this whole thing. We shall see.
But we also know that the NFL is a big, massive media conglomerate, and I
Yes.
would not be surprised if Roger Goodell threw down Thor's hammer and be like, "Nope, I control the narrative. This is my company. What I say goes." And he doesn't win it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've like kind of touching off what you said, Cameron. I think it's just ridiculous, especially in a lot of states now, weed is legalized, and I'm just like, why is he get like why would he get a suspension or like you said 8 games or whatever, whenever people that abuse their children or their spouse only get like a couple of games. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. He's not hurting nobody. He's not if he's doing it on his own time, who cares, right? Like, I just think that whole thing is just a giant dumb thing to even process. Like, as long as the players are not high on the field while they're playing or at practice, just like any other job, like, I think it's fine. No different than drinking, in my opinion. But yeah, I misspoke there.
Right?
What's up?
It's just drink responsibly, or in this case,
Exactly.
smoke weed responsibly.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. But I misspoke. I didn't mean to say the Broncos or he was suing the Broncos. I meant to say, he's suing the NFL. But
yeah, they're in there. It's just he's not necessarily suing the Broncos. It's really just the NFL. Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous to me. Like, just leave these players alone. Let them do what they want to do on their own time. Like, they don't have to be monitored like children every day. As long as they're not, like I said, beating their spouse or their children consistently or whatever. They're smoking a little weed, let them do it. But anyway, that's it for us tonight, guys. I'm sorry, Cameron. Let people know, how can they get in touch with you on Twitter?
They can get in touch with me on social media on X, right, or Twitter, X, whichever one it's called. I'm in Colorado, right? So it's not Ballerina still for me. It's Pepsi Center. It's not Empower Field at Mile High. It's Mile High Stadium. Always, so it's always Twitter still for me. But they can follow me on Twitter at Cameron Parker PO. And I do a couple podcasts. You guys can hear more of my ranting and obnoxious sports takes, Bronco takes, on Tuesday at 6 p.m. Mountain on the 5280 podcast. And they can also watch my podcast, which is called the Manely Broncos podcast, which, full disclosure, if you guys try and do something in the search bar that is MAINLY, you won't find it. It is MANELY, like the first is Maine. So Manely Broncos podcast, and that is Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. Mountain Time. And so it's a lot of fun, and it's all part of one big network. It's part of the Mile High Roundtable MHRT network. Bunch of different other Bronco content in there, or other sports, Denver sports related content in there. It's a great network full of shows and everything. It's a lot of fun.
All right, cool. So yeah, go over there, guys. Follow Parker and just go over there and watch his stuff and follow him on X or Twitter. And that is it for us tonight, guys. Do you guys got anything left you want to say before we get out of here?
No, just thank you guys again for having me on, and I would absolutely be thrilled to hop on again.
Oh, absolutely, Cameron. Please do come back. I really enjoyed having you on the show. Yes, absolutely.
Appreciate it, Cameron. Thank you. Well, that's it for us tonight, guys. We will see you again next week at the same time, 7 p.m. Mountain Time, next Sunday. Cameron, thank you for coming on tonight, man. Really appreciate it. Got through a lot tonight. It was awesome. So we will talk to you guys later. Peace.